My name is Kathy Geraghty. Welcome to the second event of Central Texas Friends of Liberty. Our group is very young. Our first meeting was held on January 10th of this year. We are a mere 3 months old. We're a nonpartisan diverse group with members from Hutto, Lockhart, McDade, Bastrop, Elgin, and Austin, to name a few. Our common goal is to educate and address our local community members and governments of any encroachment upon our inalienable rights of life, liberty, and property. We meet every Thursday at this very location. Generally, we begin to arrive at 6:30. We place our meal orders like we did today. We hobnob some and get down to business 6:45 to 7 o'clock. You're all welcome to join us. We have no membership dues as we believe that the participation is priceless. However, cash donations, pocket change, or Federal Reserve notes are accepted and very appreciated. There is a container at the exits of the entrances. I'm sure we're headed. If you'd like to sign up to receive emails, we will pass the sign-up sheets here. We have a Facebook site of the same name, Central Texas Friends of Liberty. Please join us. At this moment, I would like to introduce Barry Klein. Well, I don't have any history, so you're welcome to just take over, and I'll pass out these email forms and.
Okay. Sounds good. I'm going to put aside this handheld mic and use my laptop. Okay, Mr. Stockman, how's that sound? Working pretty good? All right, well, I'm giving you about 6 or 7 different handouts. I'm just trying to run through those pretty quickly as we get into our introductory remarks. My name is Barry Klein. I'm the president of the Houston Property Rights Association. I've been a political activist since about 1983, 82, and maybe a little bit earlier, and fell into full-time activism around that time, around 1990s, when a proposal was made in my city to bring zoning to Houston. Houston is the country's largest city without zoning. I decided I needed to work on this issue and try to stop it. And with some other friends, and new associates, we managed to push things to a referendum by initiating a campaign to get a referendum to amend the charter to require an election. Making things a little bit shorter and less complicated than they really worked out, we ended up getting a referendum on the zoning ordinance, and well, no, actually, jumping ahead of my story, I should go back 10 years to 1982, but brought me into local activism as a fight against the heavy rail system being proposed by a transit authority. And when eventually there was an election call, I defeated that, and I simply stayed with activism after that point, did not go back to my real estate work. And then, circa 1990, the zoning issue came up, and that led to the creation of the Houston Property Rights Association. To stop it, we decided to do a petition drive, and then the charter to require an election on zoning. And the result was we got a referendum on the proposed ordinance, and we defeated that. And then we got another referendum to amend the charter to require an election on any new zoning proposal. So at this point, Houston remains the largest city in the country without zoning. I continue to work on local issues, and over time, well, soon after we defeated zoning in 93, I was called upon by other people in the country to give them some advice on how zoning can be defeated in their cities. And one of those calls came in from Elgin, Texas. And I was working with a man named Andy Zumwalt, who formed a group called the Elgin Property Rights Association. And they did what we did at Houston. They got a petition around to amend the charter to require elections on zoning proposals. And that was successful. But the issue is being brought back up by the city council, who said a 1990 charter amendment required them to bring the issue up again and again. It didn't really, but that's how they chose to bring that language. So we decided to try and remove that language from the charter with another amendment. And Andy came up with the idea of sending a postcard to 400 supporters, asked them to come sign a petition on election day in May, I think it was 1997. And on that day, he covered the City Hall polling site, and the Vice President, Bill Murphy, covered the other site, and at the end of the day, they did not have enough signatures. I was down there helping out, and I went down to observe after I formed their list late in the afternoon, and discovered that people were just simply leaving the voting site and going back to their cars and not coming to the table. And it occurred to me that if they had 2 or 3 people with clipboards, they could have caught all those voters and finished that petition drive in one day. They never actually found the energy or the time to go back to that petition drive. So 6 months later, all that became for naught because of the time expired. I've been promoting the idea of election day petition drives ever since, and then got more serious about formalizing these thoughts, well, 2006. And what I did for you are a lot of my thoughts on how to do this. And the idea is that we actually have, as free market, small government activists, a way to be very effective. And I say, be effective. You should not work with candidates that can be disappointing to you. Even if the candidate wins, he's only one person on a council. He'll always be outvoted. If he's a good person, he'll be challenged by somebody who works with the establishment, so you're going to shorten the victory. But if you spend your time focusing on policy, you can have success very quickly and permanent, or semi-permanent. You always have to say a word and act to any good you may do might be undermined. So I'd like to walk you through the handouts I presented to you. The first item is linked with the agenda. This is a multi-page document. I call it the poor man's PowerPoint, because I don't have a screen projector. I just have to do it with hard copies. And we're going to have 4 speakers today besides myself. I have Byron Schirmbeck. He's with the State of Baytown. And Byron did a petition drive in that city of 74,000 to outlaw red light cameras. We'll hear about that in a few minutes. We'll also hear from Larry and Isabel Werts, who just on Friday turned in their petitions to amend the charter in Fredericksburg. This couple managed to put together their volunteers and get it almost entirely done back in November on election day. They continued on because Texas law gives you 6 months. They didn't need to rush to get it completed. We'll hear more about that from Larry and Isabel. And then we'll also hear, I'll come back in to give you more details on petition drives. And then we'll also have Mike Ford as our last speaker. Mike is from California, where he spent many years. He arrived here about 1990, but before he left California, he did something quite amazing. He and a few friends organized a statewide petition drive in the state at that time of 30 million, and managed to amend the Constitution to bring term limits to that state. And that's why Arnold Schwarzenegger is no longer the governor in California, because he was denied an opportunity to run again. So I won't go into any more of my comments at this point. I'll simply bring up our first speaker, Byron Schirmbeck. Byron lives in Baytown. He's a Navy veteran, and he's a new state coordinator for the Texas Campaign for Liberty. Of course, the Texas Campaign for Liberty is associated with the National Ron Paul movement, and I'm very pleased to present to you Byron Schirmbeck.
Troublemakers in here today, huh? Yeah. Well, that's good. I like troublemakers. I give you a little handout here. The first thing that's on the top of this is something that I don't remember being taught this in school. We went over Texas history and civil government, things like that. Texas Constitution, Section 2, inherent political power, Republican form of government. All political power is inherent in the people, and all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their benefit. The faith of the people of Texas stands pledged to the preservation of a Republican form of government, and subject to this limitation only, they have at all times the inalienable right to alter, reform, or abolish their government in such a manner as they may think expedient. Now, why do we bring that up? Because essentially, as and it sounds kind of foreign nowadays, but we are the people, we are the government. The government is not the guys up in Austin. The government is not the guys up in Washington, D.C. Those are our representatives. And as citizens in Texas, you have the right to be a legislative body. That means you can make laws, you can repeal laws, you can, essentially, it says you can even abolish the government if you want to, as long as you're sticking with the Republican form of government. So it's up to us to take our power back. Too many people have abdicated their power and left it up to the politicians to make decisions for us. We need that to a certain point because we can't all sit there and go up to Austin every day and say, I want this, I don't want that. But when the political elite starts working against us, it's time to take our power back. And one of the ways we can do that from the city level, county level, and hopefully one day the state level is through the petition process. If your city is a chartered city, that means that the state has sanctioned them to be a city and given them certain guidelines. The city hasn't chartered, it's their guidelines, their bylaws, and it gives you the rules of the city, you know, how long this council shall serve and things like that. Your city should have that readily available for you, and most of them have them online. Your best way, if you want to make a change, let's say there's a new law that they want to pass, or a new program. A lot of people are going after this UN Agenda 21 that their cities are starting to pop up everywhere. The political elite wants you to believe what we've probably all been told is to be a good citizen and to be involved. If you have a problem with something in the political process, what do? You write a letter, you make a phone call, you show up, you have a meeting, and you turn out and vote, right? Well, guess what? That doesn't work. To give you my situation, in Baytown, we implemented this red light camera program. We discovered that they were illegally shortening the yellow light so that they could get the tickets. We also found that they were claiming that the intersections were safer, but their own data showed that accidents are actually going up. More distracted drivers and people slamming on the brakes, there's more accidents. It's dangerous. When I first got into this, I didn't go after the camera program to get rid of it. I said there's problems with it, and just like if you're a good citizen and you saw a street light out or a big crack in the road, you go to your council member, you go to the city and say, hey, here's the problem, can you fix it? So I went through what we call access-based lobbying, for lack of a better word, where I contacted my council member. I had a meeting with them. I said, hey, here's the problem. The program's not working the way it's supposed to. The law says you have to do this and that. Nobody even knew what the law was. So he said, okay, let me take a look at that. I agree with you. We shouldn't do that, blah, blah, blah. And so guess what? Nothing happened. Okay, so that's where most of us go away. Most of us say, okay, well, I raised my voice, I did my best, but they're not doing anything. So that's not good enough for me. My next step was I wanted to address the council. I signed up to address the city council, and it's public access TV, so I was on the local TV for everybody too. And I brought up all the issues that I had. And I demanded some action. And of course, the council all shook their head. And, thank you for coming in, Mr. Schirmbeck. Good to see you. We'll get back to you. Okay, well, another few weeks go by. No phone call, no email, no changes have been made. One more time, I decided to address the council. And this time I told them, I said, since you're unable to make any changes, we're going to remove these cameras. You've shown that you're too irresponsible to manage them. So what we did is we started a petition drive. And at this point, guess what? All of a sudden the city wanted to sit down with me so that they could address the concerns that I had. How about that? It was kind of an interesting meeting because it was supposed to be with the city manager and the director of the camera program. But they had the city attorney in there. They had the city secretary in there recording, taking notes. They had 2 other law enforcement officers in there. It was definitely trying to send a certain message to you that I'm barking up the wrong tree. This is the point where, I'm talking about red light cameras, but it doesn't matter what your issue is. You're going to face these same problems. You're going to go down this same track. Unless you have something that's, you want to do a petition that says, you know, cats and dogs are great, everybody should treat them nice. Okay, you're going to get no opposition on that. But if it's something that's going to take away power from your local or your city government, expect a fight to some degree. It may just be the city, it may just be the local politically elite, or in my case, I had a multi-million-dollar corporation that didn't want to lose their money, and they came after me hard. We're talking lawsuits, you know, things like that. So it's all about standing on your feet and sticking with the fight. If you have a cause that you believe in, and you believe that you're right, and that's what our parents told us, you know, stick with it till the end, right? That's all we're talking about. Stick with it till the end. And you have plenty of resources for us to tell you how to do that. We went through the process. We gathered the petition. We turned one petition in. We were using the city's charter for the initiative and referendum process. It's the basically in the charter it tells you how to go about doing the petition if you want to be a legislative body, if the citizens want to legislate. There's 2 different things. There's a referendum, which is repealing an ordinance that's on the books. Let's say the city passes a law, you don't like it. The charter tells you how you can go about circulating a petition and getting on the ballot to remove it. Unfortunately, in most cities, they have a 30-day window on a referendum by the city charter, which is fairly antiquated. When the city was a lot smaller, they don't really bump that up when the city starts to grow. So it's virtually impossible to get the minimum amount of signatures in 30 days to have something repealed. We turned in a petition. The camera company sued to stop the petition. They sued the city. And the city threw up their hand and said, "Oh, we're getting sued. We don't know what to do. I guess we can't do it." So if anyone thinks that they weren't working together, you're crazy. So the next thing to do, we got a little creative. They say we can't do it. They consider our petition to be a referendum because it would remove the cameras. And they said we had to have that done within the first 30 days, which we did. Problem is that we didn't find out about the illegal short yellow lights, the increasing accidents, and all that until well after 6 months of the program. So there's no way to go back and do that, even if we didn't have the time to do that. So we got a little creative. We came up with an initiative ordinance, and the difference between an initiative ordinance and a referendum. A referendum removes something that's on the books. An initiative is a citizens proposing a new ordinance. A good example of this is some cities, they want to have a anti-smoking ordinance on the books. So they get together, they do a petition, they turn it into the city, they count the signatures, they send it out to the ballot, and people vote on whether they want to pass that ordinance or not. That's how the system works. So our initiative ordinance was a backdoor way of getting rid of the cameras by proving that it was all about the money. And what we did was we said that if you're going to use the cameras to issue a ticket, we're going to initiate, propose a new ordinance that requires a Baytown police officer to be present at the time and location of the violation and sign an affidavit that he witnessed the violation. Okay? So, again, there's nothing in there that said we're repealing the camera ordinance. There's nothing in there that said the cameras had to go. We just put an extra layer into there. So there's all kinds of ways that you can get creative. And again, this proved, without a doubt, actually in the legal papers, that this was all about the money. Because when you looked at when the camera company sued the city again, the camera company actually admitted that the contract that they entered into with the big town was based on an agreement of a certain amount of revenue. And our ordinance would harm their contract because it would reduce their revenue. So there we go. We have a full public admission in the court records that it's all about the money. If you're going to do something like this, there's a few things to go by. The first thing is know your issue front and back. You're going to wear out a lot of shoe leather, going door to door, events, things like that, to get signatures on your petition. You will run into people that are probably on your side, but they want to know a little bit more. And if you can't intelligently articulate what you're trying to do, what would happen if you fail, why they should support you, you may not get a whole lot of support from them. They want to be convinced. A lot of people want to be convinced. Now you're going to run into some other people that, doesn't matter what you say, they hate you and what you're trying to do. Your best thing is, thank you very much, goodbye. When I first started getting petitions, I would actually, I'm kind of an argumentative person. Somebody would say something that was just absolutely stupid, like, those things save lives. Well, really? Well, here's the deal. Don't waste time doing it. Thank you very much. I have a lot of signatures today. Best of luck to you. The election will be in January. So, just, it's a joke. Tell those people where the election's going to be in January or November. Tell your friends, come out in January. Know your enemy. This may be a camera company. It may be a former mayor. It could just be the city in general, the city manager. It depends on what your issue is. If you're putting something forward that's actually going to make a difference, you'll probably have an enemy. They may be small, they may be big, they may be powerful, but know who they are and know what they're doing. In my case, they spent, the camera company set up a fake citizens group with no obvious ties to them in the city, and it was a local PAC that was there to oppose our petition. So now you have an Arizona Goldman Sachs-owned camera corporation that's interfering in a local Texas political race, and nobody cared. Trust me, I've talked to the DA, the district attorney, blah, blah, blah. Nobody cares. Big government takes care of little government. That's another thing that we learn. When you want to look at doing something with your local government, if they break a law, unless you want to hire a very expensive attorney, you're probably not going to get anywhere, but you can use that as political fodder. Give you an idea on that. The last election that we had in Texas on the cameras was in League City, Texas, down on the coast. League City was actually too big for us to really effectively do a petition, just because the amount of signatures that we need, and we just didn't have enough people on the ground to go forward with it. So the next step was, I decided to do was, over a period of about 2 years, I put as much stink onto their program as I could in the public. We got plenty of press coverage. The first thing is discovered that they, pretty much anywhere that has a red light camera, I would bet you dollars to donuts they're going to have an illegally short yellow light. The state mandates how long the yellow light should be. Cities like to shorten them up because then people don't have as much time to react. And these tickets that go out for a violation that you can't even see with the naked eye, you were talking about a tenth of a second, they can give you a ticket for that. That gets more money into their pocket. When you extend the yellow light, not only do the intersections become safer because people have more time to react, but the ticket revenue dries up by about 90%. So you can see why they don't want to play with that game with the yellow lights. What we did was, in League City, we found that they had an intersection that was horribly designed, and they had an illegally short yellow light. It was people coming off of the freeway, had a short time to get over and get to the intersection. So people are coming pretty fast through there. The short yellow light contributed to a lot of tickets. We found that out, contacted the police chief, and notified him of the crime. And the crime was violating Texas law. When you do that, trust me, a police chief's going to at least acknowledge you. A police chief is a political appointee. That's another thing to remember. A police chief serves at the pleasure of the mayor and the council. So whatever his views are don't matter. His views are going to be what the city's views are. The chief actually stepped up and said, let me investigate it, let me find out. It turns out that we ended up getting over 1,700 tickets that had already been issued, dismissed, and refunded from that intersection because I was right. But we got the media out there, and so this issue got out into the media. The next thing is that a few months later showed that the city had illegally appropriated red light cameras. When the city makes money off the cameras, they can only spend money on certain things, traffic safety improvements, which would be like road signs, street lights, crosswalks, things like that. Well, public information requests are your friend. Trust me. You will be amazed at what you can pull up in a public information request. Be as broad as you can. We found hilarious emails between city officials and the camera companies, and it's other things that will just make you cry. We found out that they were spending money that are only supposed to be used for traffic safety items on entry weapons, scopes, computers, training rooms, and a military-style observation platform. This is a big box on a scissor lift that they go park out in parking lots, and they have unmanned cameras in there that sit there and watch for purse snatchers and things like that. So this is the kind of thing that we do. Eventually what we do, we put so much stink on this, we actually filed a criminal complaint with the DA that got more press coverage. Finally, the city council had enough of me over about a 1.5 year period, and they actually voted themselves to put the camera issue on the ballot. How about that? I didn't have to get one single signature. It was somewhat of a compromise because they didn't say to end the cameras right away because they didn't want to worry about a lawsuit about breaking the contract and things like that. But what they did was they said, here's an ordinance that you're going to vote on that gives you, lets you decide if you want to keep the cameras after the contract expires. And it was 77% against. Now we're using that political pressure to go against them to remove the cameras early. We already have one camera down. This can lead you just about anywhere, too. I just started this a few years ago, and I've gone up through the ranks, helped other people start petitions in other cities. There's a ton of stuff to know that we can always go over with you anytime we need to help anybody out. Now I was just a little over a month ago, I became the state coordinator for Campaign for Liberty. It's a great organization. Definitely take a look at them. You'll get email updates about bad legislative items that are coming through. And we also hold classes for confrontational lobbying, which is what we do. Confrontational lobbying is not going down to Austin and saying, please listen to me. Confrontational lobbying is going to say, Mr. Politician, do what I say or I'm going to replace you. That's what we do. We do that through a network of our members, and anybody that's interested in that, like I said, I got my cards over here in the sign-up sheet. I'll just stop right here. I don't know if anyone has any questions for me.
What was the name of your organization?
It's Campaign for Liberty.
The initiative that you did rather than the referendum, what was the percentage?
Well, we needed 5% of the votes cast in the last mayoral election where there was a opponent for the mayor.
And did you have the same 30-day limit?
No.
With initiative, you get more time.
Well, the 30-day comes with the referendum. If you want to repeal an ordinance that's on the books, it has to be within 30 days of that ordinance being passed.
Oh, I see. Not the
right. Now, the initiative, since we're proposing a new ordinance, there's no, the only limit you have is the Texas law that says you have to have it within 6 months. Signatures are only good for 6 months. Yes, sir.
Relating to the data that you needed to be able to point out the issues, for instance, did you ask for generic data? Give me where all the cameras are, what are the number of tickets, how much revenue have you made, what is the time? Is that how you got it?
Somewhat. Now, the good thing is and if anybody wants to do this, definitely, I got a sign-up sheet over here, let me know. I can help you do this. But you can go right now onto the Texas Transportation TxDOT website, and they have accident reports for the cities for these red light cameras because they're required to put accident reports in there annually. And you'll find amazing stuff. In Cleveland, Texas, the cities are required to report 18 months of pre-installation crash data before the cameras go up, and every year they're supposed to report annually the crash data so you can compare before and after. In Cleveland, Texas, they had more accidents in less than the first 30 days than they did in the entire 18 months before they put the cameras up. There's not a clear evidence of what a danger these things are to the driving public out there. But that's the kind of information you can get. But yes, I've always made my public information request as broad as I could. I would say I need all communications between the city and the camera company between these dates. I need all information on the camera, on the red light camera program. And what you can do is it's your right to go in after they assemble the data to review all the data and select which ones that you want. And I highly recommend that because instead of paying $500 or $1,000 and then coming down on you, have them assemble everything and say, I want to copy this and that, separate it out. And make sure that they're following the law.
Yes. Let me see if I understand. You say, assemble it, I'll come down and look at it, and I'm copy it. Is that how it works? Or do you say assemble it all?
Yeah, you said, like in my case, I said, I want all communications between the camera company and any and their representatives and any city employee, representative, member of the city of Baytown between the month of January of this date and 6 months later. They came back and said, well, we have 800 documents that are responsive to your request. I said, okay, great. I want to exercise my right to come down and review them in your office. They have to let you review what they've gathered, and you can say, okay, I just want this, I just want that. That way, throw a wide net out there and spend some time in there, and you can pick out what you really want out of it. Yes, ma'am.
In Bastrop County and Elgin, I'm sure it's the same way with Bastrop City, you can do an open records request. It says it's not the same parameters as a FOIA. It doesn't cost anything. But I did an open records request with Bastrop County Sheriff's Office. Within one day, I had what I needed. Elgin, it took a month, and it was scrubbed because I keep identical records, what I was looking for. So, in that case, I guess I could have bumped it up and done a FOIA and, paid legal fees to do that.
Well,
but how do you keep me from scrubbing the data?
Well, here's the, did you initiate that with the city secretary? The Open Records Act, it's a Texas act.
Right.
It's different from an actual FOIA. It's very similar. The rules are very similar. If you go to the designated open records person, which is usually the city secretary, they have to comply with Texas law. And you can look at the regulations up on the Attorney General's website. They have 10 business days to get back to you with your request. If they're not going to get back with you within 10 business days, or if they're going to request an opinion from the Attorney General on whether or not they're going to give the information to you, they have to notify you by letter. You also have to, if for some reason they're going to withhold something from you, they actually have to get it. Typically, there's some rules that they do and they don't. Some things they don't, but like if it has somebody's social security number in there or something like that, they can redact that without having to get an opinion from the Attorney General. But a lot of the stuff they actually have to send a letter to the Attorney General and say, hey, here's what the person asked for, here's what we have that matches that. We think that we shouldn't have to give this stuff out. What do you think? And in that case, it gives them more time too. But if any of that happens, if they go over 10 days, contact the Attorney General. Their open records hotline, the people that are working there are actually very, very good. I had one lady that actually kept following up with me from the Attorney General's office saying, did you get it yet? How's this? Do you want me to call her for you? I said, yeah, give her a call. So, you're a city secretary and you get a call from the Attorney General's office wanting to know about somebody's open records request. Guess how fast you can probably get on that? Pretty quick. But keep in mind, there are some things, like I said, that the big government will take care of the smaller government. When we found out that the city was illegally misappropriating funds in violation of Texas law, we reported to the Attorney General. Guess what the Attorney General's office says? They say, well, our representative for Texas law in the city is the city attorney. Okay, well, who does the city attorney work for? The city, right? Okay, how often is a city attorney going to go, yeah, you know what, we really broke the law, we screwed the pooch on that? No, it's not going to happen. You go to the district attorney's office, well, a lot of issues they don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. So, but if it's a simple open records request, there's no controversy with it. They got some wonderful people there that will really send them some nice threatening letters and things like that if they have a clear violation. Yes, sir. Okay, let me get him.
You mentioned doing a review of the stuff you're going to get. You haven't asked for that capability, or does it just come automatically?
Usually you have to express that. I usually do that in my open records request. Sometimes just emailing the city secretary is good. Sometimes you have to go down there and fill out a form that they have. And also keep in mind that they do have the right to limit the amount of hours that they use on your request. So if you're, and it's fairly reasonable. I mean, I think you have to request like 100 documents a month every month in order for you to hit that. But I usually do that in my request. I say if the responses are over a certain amount of pages, I would like to come in and review them before you do anything. So you can definitely do that. Yes, sir.
What do you do if the legal transaction has occurred and it's the county and it's duly noted by the auditor in the financial statement? And you can't get the district attorney to do anything about it.
Have you tried the Attorney General's office?
Not yet. That's where I'm going.
That would be my next step. The other thing is, it probably won't come to this, but if your goal is, and this may kind of sound funny, guys, but with a lot of this stuff, this isn't a legal fight. I don't know what your issue is, but with a lot of stuff, it's not a legal fight where you have to go through the chain and everything. It's a political fight. And if that's the one thing you take away today, that's the biggest thing that changed my view on everything. I was sitting there worried about, okay, well, I turned this in. They're supposed to count the number of signatures. Why aren't they doing it? Well, because they don't want to. Okay, well, how do I get them to count? Well, you're going to have to go bust them in and out. And how do you do that? You go to the media. You make things ugly for them. Politicians hate a few things. They hate bad publicity. They hate having to do something they really don't want to do. And they absolutely hate somebody that's a burr in their saddle. So what I would do on your issue, first go to the Attorney General. If that doesn't work, guess what? There's a nice little group that we have here in Texas. It's called the Texas Rangers. And they investigate political corruption. So that may be one thing that you can do too. Now, if you have a complaint, a legal complaint filed with the district attorney, the Attorney General, and the Texas Rangers, you think you could probably get somebody from the media to show up and talk to you? Probably. And once that's out in the media, they can't ignore you. They're going to get calls and questions from all that kind of stuff. So it'll be a good way to go. Anybody else? Okay.
Well, we're trying to record. Now, we do have a microphone in the back, and I see that our sound man has repositioned it now, because I forgot to mention to you that if you have a question, please go to the microphone, and that way we're more likely to get it recorded. And so I think we're going to get it back in position. And if you have a question for Larry or Isabel, maybe considering the joint presentation, please go to the microphone. Now we have another handout technical man showing up. That's good. Okay. Our next presentation deals with the petition drive I mentioned earlier that was just completed on Friday, started back in November in Fredericksburg to make it more difficult for City Council to play fast and loose with public money. And I'm going to assume that this petition will be validated and they'll be voting on this in November. But we'll hear more about that from Mary. Okay, thank you.
One of the things I wanted to do before we talk about what we did in preparation for this petition drive was to give you some background. We, in Fredericksburg, the City Council has operated almost independent from the voters. They have financed project after project with not with general obligation bonds, but with certificates of obligation. And they were talking about building a magnificent city aquatic park, far beyond our needs. And they had a city council meeting to announce that, and the mayor said, and recorded in the paper, he said, we're going to use general obligation bonds because that means we don't have to go to the voters for approval, or certificates of obligation. We don't have to go to the voters for approval. Well, that got our attention, and we decided that we really needed, even though there were just a few of us, we needed to do something about that, to reverse that trend so the voters had an opportunity to vote on major capital projects. This one was going to be $3.2 million. So we went out as a group of 6 and gathered sufficient petition signatures to have it put on the ballot. Well, the city preempted us. They put it on the ballot anyhow. But if we hadn't done it, it wouldn't have gone on the ballot. The certificates would have been issued. The city would have been indebted for $3.2 million for a pool or an aquatic center on the outskirts of town, which replaced one in the center of town, which would no longer be accessible to children who wouldn't ride their bikes and walk and that sort of thing. Well, that encouraged us. We found that we could actually do something and make a difference and make things happen. So Isabel organized with various council, the one-day petition vote, an election day in November. And we had 4 precincts, and I think we had enough volunteers to cover them for the 12-hour period the polls were open. Now, the council was very, very unhappy with it. And they actually, I was standing in the parking lot of our EMS system, right at the edge of the parking lot, and a councilman told a police officer to come out and tell me I couldn't stand on the parking lot. I had to stand in the weeds just inside the parking lot. And I said, fine, I'll do that. As people exited the polls, would just say, would you like to sign the petition? I could walk over to them, but I couldn't stand. I couldn't have a little sign on the parking lot, which was fine. I missed a few people, but that's okay. The same councilman, who I have to admit I helped get elected, but he turned out to be someone I didn't care for later. The same councilman went to another polling place himself and asked the volunteer if he could take pictures of him getting people's signature on the petition. Well, it turned out that that volunteer was a retired circuit court judge, so he wasn't the best person for him to approach. But he did take the pictures, and then he would go where people were walking to the petition location. He'd walk over and intercept them and tell them why this was a bad idea. Well, it wasn't a bad idea. It was a good idea. On that day, we got enough signatures to already present the petition, but additional signatures were required later. But it was all Isabel's idea, and it was a great idea. Well, it came from Werts, actually, but he's down there. It shows how easy it was. It was so easy. And it becomes a social occasion. You're talking to people you may know or don't know, but you're friendly with them, you're visiting with them. I never had one person refuse to sign the petition. Not one. I did on the previous one for the swimming or the aquatic center. I had one refusal, and that was the reporter for the newspaper who felt it would be a little hard to have that on. And of course, city employees, they're scared. But the thing that's important here is that it helps to have an issue.
Real quick,
Oh, you want to say something?
one of that, this one-day petition drive was not about the aquatic center. That had already been taken care of. What we discovered after we got involved with the aquatic center question, and I started asking questions about what was going on in our city government, we found out that over $6 million had been spent on the golf course. And while they were spending this $6 million, our swimming pools had gone to the place where they had to be replaced. And we have no neighborhood parks that are supported by the city. So that really, we started investigating how are we going to stop this, because even though we had, and over 2 million of this had come out from our electrical department, and they would turn around and raise the rates to boost up the reserve account so they could again pirate the money for something that we didn't know they were doing.
Okay.
So anyway, what we decided was, again, we elected 3 members to the city council that we thought were going to make a difference, and all 3 of them went back on what they said they were going to do and supported more money to the golf course. So what we did was we had this one-day petition drive to amend our home rule charter, saying that it was prohibited for the council to spend any money out of any of the enterprise funds, which are the funds that collect money fees from us, on anything other than that department to operate and maintain that department. And so that's what our one-day petition drive was about. And that's what we turned in Friday, and that's what's going to be on the ballot in November. And believe me, it's going to pass. It's a lot.
Yeah, that's, she actually got ahead of herself of us, but that is what our petition drive is about. Does everybody know what enterprise funds are? Okay, everybody?
Well, probably not much, no.
Okay, enterprise funds are monies collected by a city entity for services provided. In our case, the city provides the electricity. They buy it wholesale, but then they resell it. Water services, sewer, and wastewater treatment. Each one of those is a separate department, and each one of them makes a profit. The profits go into an account called an enterprise fund. The enterprise funds, logically, would be used to fund the operations and capital replacements of that department. But the cities have found that they can just take money out of there at will from any enterprise fund and spend it anywhere they want, because nobody's watching it. There's no watchdog over the enterprise funds, and there's no prohibition for their using it for any operation or capital project that they want. So what we wanted to do is stop them from using enterprise funds for anything that they decided they wanted to do without board approval. And Isabel mentioned the golf course. The golf course, over a 20-year period, lost $2.7 million. You know, a couple of years ago, one of the councilmen said, well, why don't we borrow from the enterprise fund? Because we've been making a lot of noise. And they borrowed from 2 enterprise funds, $1.8 million, to refurbish the golf course. Then we got a new city manager, and he said, well, why don't we forgive the 2.7 that was granted or lost over the previous 20 years? Well, what we call that in civilian life is bankruptcy. But they called it forgiving the debt. Same thing. So here we are now, we've forgiven 2.7, we're spending another $1.8 million, and the golf course is going to repay that to the city over a 20-year period. That's nonsense. They've lost $300,000 every year for 20 years. Anyhow, the whole point is that we have to get some voter control over how the enterprise funds are used. When our city loaned the golf course the $1.8 million, the next council meeting, they voted to raise the rates on those utilities. Yes.
I've got some information that Barry has actually sourced.
Can you use the microphone and try to be more formal this time?
Here.
Put on the mic. Here's one.
All right.
But we got one.
There's one here if you'd like to use this one.
I've got some information. Barry, I'm going to tell you, all of you probably already know him, having seen him and seen some of his emails. He gave me 4 boxes of information related to the Houston Sports Authority. Now, he's the Aaron Brockovich of the Sports Authority. He has collected so much information, it's unbelievable. But one of the things that will help you is a document that, having read it, I knew immediately what this meant. It was written by the Houston Chronicle, and they quote the district attorney in the early 90s. It was regarding a grant that essentially was given without due consideration, and the district attorney labeled that as illegal and told the county officials that it was illegal, and they did it anyway. Now, Barry's notes on that article, which I just read, was that why didn't the district attorney do something about it? I don't know. But it is illegal, and I will email you that copy of that article, and you can do with it however you want, because we're getting ready to do the same thing with the Houston Sports Authority, and Harris County's county judge at that time, and some of the current commissioners. They gave $26 million out of the toll road authority to a bankrupt sports authority without due consideration. So therefore, we believe that we've got a fairly good argument. We'll see what happens.
I remember when Tom Lanier said that they had built that stadium with city money over his dead body.
Yeah.
But he was no longer mayor. That is good. I want to back up just a little bit. Before we did this thing with the swimming pool, I have to keep going back to that because that was the start of everything. We wrote a lot of letters to the editor. Now, they don't publish them all. They can. But they will publish some, and they had the effect of waking people up to this particular issue, that there's something going on here that you really need to be concerned about. Don't ignore it. So they've read the paper. Then when you go to their door and knock on the door, they know what you're talking about. And that's why we didn't have any refusals. Yeah.
One last thing, and I'll shut up, but this has also been classified by the county auditors as an illegal transaction. It's noted in the financial statement, so it might be a good place to look and see if it's been
It's
noted
a
by your
little
auditor.
more difficult in a very small town.
Well,
to get people to
actually,
do it.
it's not illegal. What they did was not illegal.
Oh, in our town, no.
In our, under our home rule charter. See, everybody thinks home rule is a good thing, local control, right? And it only works if your city council is for the residents and not for the tourists.
It's illegal in that, according to state code, you have to do it. If you're going to make an investment, it has to be with a rated bond. If it's not rated, it isn't an investment. There you go.
This is not a...
They don't
golf
consider
course
it
was
an
not-
investment.
Yeah, because we researched it pretty carefully, and under the home rule charter, government can do anything that's not prohibited by state law. A general rule city can only do those things that state law permits them to do. And since we're in a home, and the new city manager sent me an email saying, well, because Barry said, ask him under what ordinance they're doing this, and the city manager emailed back and said that we have no ordinance, but under our home rule charter, we can do anything we deem appropriate with any money that's in the budget. And it is legal. We researched it. But to talk about how big book government backs up little government, our school board put up a bond issue, and school board, a school district bond issue can not include maintenance, or it's only for capital improvements. Well, they put up a bond, it passed, and then somebody said, hey, wait a minute, this stuff is for improvements. That's illegal.
No. They said it was for operating, and that was
operating.
illegal.
And so, anyway, so she contacted the state attorney general's office, and they said, well, the people passed it, so we can't do anything about it.
Well, that was true, of course. We should have known better.
But if,
People should have, and if we had all written to the paper and got our letters published, at least people would have been awakened to what was actually happening. The media, I think you said it, the media is your best friend, your very best friend. Use it. But remember, when you're writing to the media, or your letter to the editor, what is truth? Truth is what you can prove. Don't go in there and say, well, about, or nearly, or almost, because people, your enemy will come back to you and say, it wasn't 1,000, it was 953. Okay, so you've lost credibility right away. So remember that truth is what you can prove, and print truth always. And kill them with facts. And do it over and over and over again, as long as you can get away with it, as long as the paper will take it. If they won't take your letter, have a friend sign it, but get it in there.
we also had a meeting with the city manager, and they initiated, you know, the same way, we made too much noise. And they said, well, he wrote to me, he said, well, I don't know what your petition is about, but why don't you come in and we'll discuss your concerns and maybe we can work something out together. So I said, fine. Well, I showed up with all 7 of the committee members, which they were not expecting. Can't hear me?
Yeah, I want to ask a question. Are you ready?
Okay.
Did you finish what you were saying?
Yeah. And anyway, so they sat there, and what he said was, well, we are concerned with this, and we had a retreat, and we talked about it, and right now we're setting down some policy where, you know, this is going to be better for you. And so we said, well, when is the policy going to be ready? Oh, sometime in June. Of course, our deadline was May 6th for getting in the petition. And so, well, that's very nice, and my husband said, you know, policy can be changed, amendments can't. So we're going on with our drive.
The city attorney accompanied him, of course, on this little meeting, and it was really embarrassing for him, I think, because we went to listen. We didn't go to argue or to explain. And what they wanted us to do was forget the petition idea completely, lay off, and we'll take care of it. We're going to trust us. We're going to fix it. Don't worry about it. Well, they're not going to do it unless you make them do it. Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me make sure I understood you correctly. As I believe you earlier said that they made you move out of the parking lot of the polling place to do your petition?
I was outside the 100-foot limit, but I was on city property, the parking lot. The cops came up and said, you can't stand here. I know him, he was very nice, but he still said, you can't stand here. Well, I knew who he came from, so rather than embarrass him, all I had to do was back up a few feet and stand in the grass.
Okay, well, I just want to make the point. I learned this when I was collecting signatures with the Austin Toll Party in Austin. I learned this from a lady named Linda Curtis. And if they give access to the public to a poll, and it certainly applies to private property, and it probably applies to city property also, if they get access to people to the poll, they have to give access to people that are collecting signatures. And that's been established by case law. I can't cite you the cases, but that's true. So don't let the people back you out of that, whoever collects signatures.
Well, with me, it wasn't a problem. I was going to get the signatures. I knew that. And so if that makes them happy, I can just bank that to use later on. And I will, just
Real
like
quick,
taking the guy's pictures.
I personally have been involved with 3 petition drives since the Family Aquatic Center. And it took me, I can remember the last one, it took me 3 weeks of going out 4 hours every night to gather 150 signatures, because everybody wants to talk, and so you're lucky if you get 10 signatures in one night. And with the one-day petition drive, we got all 369 signatures that we needed with 15 people. And most of them only worked 2 hours. So if you're going to have a petition, this is absolutely the way to go.
It's the only way to go, really. Because it's trudging up and down the street at night is not a way to do it. You interrupt people, half of them are sore about it. They still may sign it, but it's hard on you, it's hard on them, and it just takes too much time. And this is just like magic. You just go out and get the signatures. You don't have to do anything special.
And all your signers are certain to be voters because they...
That's the other thing.
Yeah.
I forgot that. They weren't all voters. Actually, a lot of them were turned away because they were in the wrong precinct, or they lived in the county, or God knows what
That
all.
happened because Fredericksburg just passed the 10,000 population thing where you can have county and city voting at the same precinct.
Yeah.
And so this was the first election where we had city precincts separate from county precincts. And so some of those people didn't realize that they'd been pushed out since they were in the county. They had to go someplace else. But there were maybe 10 signatures. And I did go over every signature myself with the rolls to make sure that they were registered, because sometimes mistakes do get made.
Explain how easy that is.
It's very easy. I just contacted the county clerk and got in touch with the person who's in charge of the registration, and she immediately sent me what the total registered voters were and a copy of the registration via email. And so I have it on my computer, and anytime that I wanted during the day I could just go and check it. But I did that, and so we know that all 440 signatures that we turned in, and we only needed 369, that all of them are registered voters and they can't be invalidated.
They may try to, but you can then, that's the only time you're going to have any confrontation, I think.
Real quick, Barry, I told you that I wanted to hand them in Monday instead of Friday, because we had told them that we were going to turn it in Friday, and I was afraid they might not be there or something.
Yeah.
Well, the city secretary wasn't there.
Right.
There has to be an assistant there, so that's no
clerk
problem.
took it, right?
But still,
Yeah,
they did try to put that.
Yes, they'll do everything they can. The guy that was elected to the council, whose resume I wrote for the newspaper because I thought he was a good guy, has been the real snake in the grass. He's the one who has all the time in the world. He makes these involved spreadsheets and says, here are the choices we have to make to raise the rates and all that stuff. And he just, the council becomes awestruck. So he's really managing the council in effect. And he's the one who sent the cops out and was out taking the pictures of the signers and all that thing. He's a real pain in the neck. But I can talk to him and tell him what he's doing, and it's wrong. It may not make any difference, but I want him to know that I'm there. We want him to know that we're there, that we're watching them. And we've had, Isabel particularly, has had enough contact with the Attorney General's office and the Secretary of State's office, then to the city, that they know that we have the cooperation of both of those bodies in gathering information we need, getting advice we need, where to go to do things. They've been very, very helpful. They've never really said, no, we're not going to do that for you. That's what they're there for. And the Ethics Commission is another one. Think about them if you have somebody that you think's doing something they shouldn't be doing as an elected official. Go to the Ethics Commission. They don't have anything else to do. That's what they do. The last thing I want to say is persevere. Don't give up. You know, maybe your measure will be defeated. Do it again. Don't quit. Remember Churchill. Never, 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 never give up, because you're in charge. Act like it. Okay?
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Isabel. Appreciate it. Now we need to get that microphone. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we'll see you back here in 10 minutes. Thank you very much. I want to mention again that we do have the microphone in the back. Let's try to have questioners go up there so we get everything recorded. Also, I'd like to say that anybody who's got a camera that takes pictures, please take pictures of our events and maybe send them to me later. That would be very helpful. I'm hoping to get all of this kind of activity recorded and put up on a website eventually, and make it part of an overall effort to have a national organization that can teach Americans who want to retrieve their lost freedoms how they can do it through the policy changing process. In Texas, we've got a pretty good system, and other states have their own systems, many of which are, I don't know them all yet, but it's my impression that most states do allow their citizens some kind of local initiative process. And I think the steps I'm going to explain in a minute will show you that this can be very, very powerful and effective in short order. So, let's take you back to the agenda. You all have a copy of this, and this is my first handout that we'll discuss page by page. As you can see, I point to 5 different techniques or mechanisms you can use to take control of your government. One is the Election Day Petition Drive, which we already had a lot of conversation about from Larry and Isabel. I would supplement that, especially in bigger cities where you don't have enough volunteers to cover the voting sites. You can do that with block walking, a Liberty Voters Block, coalition building, and then doing petition drives by internet. And let me explain a bit about what I mean by that. When you're getting signatures on Election Day, I suggest you go out with 5 clipboards, and you can make them out of cardboard, like this heavy-duty cardboard that you can get from a local appliance dealer, or make them out of foam core. Make sure they're lightweight, and you can simply use rubber bands to hold a petition on your clipboard. And it's a lot easier to use than the standard clipboard, which has those big heavy clamps on it that makes it very clumsy. And with those 5 clipboards, you can use 3 for your petition, and then 2 for a separate document, which is what you're going to use to build your Liberty Voters Block. You're going to ask the people to sign a petition, and you've got 3 because you might run into 3 voters at a time. They can all do it simultaneously. And as they sign, you can give them the other clipboard, which has the form they can fill in to give you their email address and their phone number. So now you're building your contact list, your Liberty Voters Block, and you can use that to put pressure on the elected officials to be cooperative with you, to not be hostile to what you're doing. And over time, you get enough of those that you can actually do a petition drive from your computer by simply sending a PDF file to the people in your city and ask them to download, print out a copy, and then mail it back by conventional mail. So this will make you a very, very, I think, influential, if not powerful person in your community, because now you have a way to conduct a petition drive at home. So I want to point that out to you to show you, to underscore the fact that this is a way to do it. The Liberty Voters Block is a way to be effective at beyond the city level. If you have a city above 5,000 population, you are a home rule city, in all likelihood you have to vote to take that step. If you're under 5,000, then you're only a general law city. You live by the rules that the state sets, and you don't have a charter that you can amend. But you can still go out there and get signatures on a petition asking City Council to adopt an ordinance or simply to adopt a policy, and you're getting email and phone numbers so you can urge your new allies to put pressure on the elected officials when you ask them to adopt that new policy. You can ask them to come down with you to City Council, fill up council chambers to the point where you're spilling out into the hallway, make it a very dramatic event that you want that council to adopt that policy. And you can do that at the county level. So in the county level, you probably will have 10, 12 or more voting sites, even in a small population county. So you may not be able to get all the signatures you would like on a petition to force a referendum to amend the charter, but you can still get enough, particularly if you select the districts where you have council members who are likely to be your allies and you want to give them the right message. By focusing on those precincts with your volunteers, then you'll be able to use that contact information to put pressure on those elected officials, and you want them to become sponsors of the charter amendment, because council itself can put something on the ballot. They don't have to wait for a citizen's petition to come in. So by putting pressure on, you want 2 because one person is easily marginalized, can be perceived as a crank. But if you have 2, that's immensely important. So you really want to get 2, if not more, and have them make statements to the media, make statements during the business of city council to put something on the agenda. And that may work. The next time around, let's say it doesn't work and they don't put it on the ballot for a vote, you go out and put your voters, your volunteers at other precincts. So over time, you're getting more and more of the city into your database, and you can do this with a PDF file sent out by internet. As I say, you can't do that at the county level. There is no charter, but as you're doing this, you're getting more and more people into your Liberty Voters Bloc, and you're going to be, I perceive, more and more effective. And you can even use all those contacts to influence decisions made about who's going to be winning elections at the city council, at the school boards, which are very hard to influence, I think, as well as commissioner's court. And the more times you do this, the more you'll be perceived as a driving force, as a commanding presence in local politics, and I think it'll be you'll find politics much more rewarding. Let's turn from the top page. Let's turn to the second page. This is a couple of photos that were sent to me by Larry and Isabel on Saturday, showing themselves the day before on Friday, turning in their signatures. You see there the assistant city secretary signing. She's accepting the petitions that were submitted, and among the handouts is one that has a copy of the letter that she signed, which has all the statistics in it, in which she acknowledges receipt of those documents. And then the lower photo shows I guess several of the volunteers, if not all, for the group that Larry and Isabel put together. And I would say they look fairly pleased with themselves. If you'll turn the page. Now, if you choose to do this, to do a petition drive to amend the charter, you're going to have to live by the state's rules. It's all on the web, and if you go to the Texas Ethics Commission website, you'll find a document like this, and you'll want to get the specifics on the General Purpose Political Committee. That's what you are, even though you only have one issue in mind. You fall under the General Purpose Committee. So that'll help you find the legal documents you'll need to be aware of, instructions, and the forms themselves. When you start a petition drive, you don't have to do this, but if you expect to spend $500 over time, and of course you have a petition drive, and then you have to win the election that comes, I think I think you enhance your credibility if you file as a PAC, and you simply fill out a 2-page form and carry it down to the city secretary, and it's filed with her, and you're off and running. Then you have to find somebody who's going to keep track of what's donated and what you're spending. But that's not very troublesome when you have a small city with a small campaign. Now, the next page is something I just looked at more carefully a few days ago and realized it was really quite interesting. West University is a small city surrounded by Houston, and this article from November last year showed that they're contemplating some charter changes and some other procedures about elections, including reducing the number of voting sites from 7, I think it is, down to no, I think they have 4, and they're going to reducing it to 1 for the upcoming election. And they apparently done some research, and another city in Harris County, Deer Park, which I think has a population of about 70,000, used to have 7 voting sites, and they determined they can get down to 1. Well, that's good news, because that means even in a city as big as Deer Park, if they get down to 1 voting site, that means it's a lot easier to cover those voters with your volunteers. You only have 1 voting site to cover. What's also interesting is that in the bigger cities, you have multiple voting sites typically, but you also have maybe only 1 or 2 for early voting. Now, in Texas, roughly half the voters are now voting during early voting. So if you have some dedicated volunteers, you can go out to those voting sites for early voting, catch roughly half the voters, get their signatures. So now you have a way to do a petition drive before you even get to election day, because you can get enough during early voting, and that makes it a lot easier to be influential in cities beyond the smaller ones, I say under 20,000, where you typically may only have 2 voting sites. Typically, but of course, in the case of Fredericksburg, they actually had 4. But I think that's unusual.
And that was because it was a national election.
Oh.
On our regular, like this May, will only be 1.
Okay, well, that's good. That confirms my thought that small cities typically only have 1 or 2. In the case of Elgin, which I talked about earlier, they had 2, and it's a city of, at the time, 20,000. So I think in many ways things are sort of breaking in our direction in terms of making it easier to do an election day petition drive, or at least an election season when you include the early voting time. So turning the page. Now this is very important. This is from the Mercatus Center. It's a free market think tank based in the Washington area. And they published a report by 2 gentlemen, William Ruger and Jason Soren. Now, I communicated with William Ruger teaches at Texas State University, which is not far from here. And he is co-authored with Jason Sorens this book that looks at all 50 states and ranks them in terms of relative measures of freedom, both personal and economic. And William Ruger would have been here today, but he's been busy selling this new book, so he didn't have any time to come be with us. But he said he would be available at a future time. We may choose to do another workshop later in the year as we get ready to get into the November election. The other fellow, the other co-author is Jason Sorens. Jason has a national reputation because he, when he was back in grad school, founded the Free State Project. Now, who here is not familiar with the Free State Project? We all know about the Free State Project. One person does not know. Well, this is really something quite interesting. He decided that if the free market-minded people in this country could find a small population state and move there, they can become a very important part of the political dynamics in that state and make it even better than it already is. And they looked around across the country, and Wyoming was one of the runner-up states, but they finally chose New Hampshire for a number of reasons. And so they put out a pledge form for people to sign and say when they get the 20,000 pledges, they will all move to New Hampshire and make it even more free than it already is. Now, New Hampshire, according to this index put out by William Ruger and Jason, is actually the freest state in the country, with Texas only being 14. So they're already a very good state. So, and there's been 5,000 people who have already moved to New Hampshire. They're called early movers. And they're getting very close to that 20,000 pledge. They expect to get there this year. The word will go out, just now it's time to make good on your pledge and move to New Hampshire. Another 15,000 will move in. And so we can hope to see that New Hampshire will move even further in the free market pro-liberty direction and be kind of a model for the rest of the country. And as we see the good things that we expect would transpire in such an environment, we can point to those as things we can do in Texas. In the meantime, we have, as I point out, William Ruger, not far away, the co-author of this report, and I'm sure groups such as this one might want to work with him on ideas that might be done to make Texas even better than it is. Okay, let's put that aside for the minute and turn to the next item in your packet. This is the one titled Power Shift Politics. This is a multi-page item, and we'll go through it fairly quickly. This is another summary of what I've got 2 or 3 different documents which summarize what I'm talking about in terms of election day petition drives and other tactics to make it work for you and for all of us. And so this is explains how to do one-day petition drives. You supplement it with block walking if you don't manage to complete your petition drive in one day, or with early voting thrown in, and using the voters block to put pressure on the elected officials to adopt their appropriate policy and not give you needless resistance or take you into court trying to fight off your reform. That voters block list can be critical. And of course, I also talk about using Facebook and Twitter as all the ways to ramp up the pressure you're putting on the elected officials to do the right thing, to adopt the policy you want them to adopt, or to not to interfere or violate the laws, they try and make it difficult for you to make your reform become law. Okay, let's move on. Turning the page on that one. Oh, I should turn to the third page if it would. Now, the third and fourth pages is something I put out together a couple of years ago, and it's a very fine-grained explanation of how you do election day petition drives. And when you get into this strategy, you'll want to look at that very carefully to see how to go about it. If you turn to the next two pages, this is an example of a form to pick up your list for the voters block. As I say, after you've given the voter a petition to sign, you can give them a second clipboard which has this document. If they don't sign this one, you want them to print their name so you can read it. You want their email address and phone number in particular. And these become, in many ways, the most important tool you'll have in your reform kit. Turning the page once more. When you turn in your petition, you're going to get a referendum at a future date. It could be a few months down the road. It could be 2 or 3 years, because in Texas, 2 full years have to transpire between the days in which you amend your charter. You can do multiple amendments on one day, but 2 full years have to pass before you do it again. And under Texas law, your city council can also postpone it until a general election. That could end up being 3 years. But in the meantime, you got to build the public support for what you're proposing. And I suggest when you start with an issue you cannot lose, because you don't want to stumble as the first time out of the gate. But eventually you're going to have to get into more complex, difficult to understand issues. That's going to take some explaining. And so you got to go out and build a bandwagon behind your reform measure, and you're going to have to build a coalition. And this document about how to break out of the political box with 6 people working over 2 years is, I think, a smart way to go about it. You have a website, you show who's joining you in your campaign. When it finally gets close to election, you can use all that support in your advertising to show that it's almost a consensus, and election day will simply confirm that the public wants to see that reform become law. If you turn to the 2 pages beyond, I think one of the most effective ways to build a coalition is to have a slide presentation. I think that it's a sign of confidence and sophistication, and images, as we all know, are very powerful persuaders. So a slide presentation allows you to do that. This can be a little expensive. You need a projector, you need a screen, you need somebody to produce the slide presentation. But in this day and age, there's lots of skilled amateurs who can do that kind of thing and who have the equipment.
What about YouTube?
Well, everything can go up on YouTube as well.
Right. YouTube and just put out whatever you do to get to YouTube. I'm not that technical.
Yeah, YouTube is, you try and get your message out as many ways as possible, but if you have a slide presentation, then you can go out to the local Rotary clubs, the Lion clubs, the civic clubs, trade association, the political clubs. You've got something there, and you're bringing a resolution that they can adopt. If you go back 1 page in the handout, there's a sample of a resolution that you simply boil your issue down to the elements of it and give them a place where an officer can sign it after the group votes to approve it. Okay, turning on beyond the slide presentation page, here's a proposed charter amendment which I think can be critical to recapturing lost property rights in this country. Now, I think most of us feel very frustrated because we don't have much influence on what government does or what the politicians do. We're describing here a way where you actually become the lawmaker. You become the policy maker by choosing to amend charters with the petition process. And at the local level, probably besides raising taxes needlessly, one of the worst things the government does is take away our property rights. And this has been going on into the 19th century, and it's only accelerated. I think the way to get them back, or to start that process, is to put the city in a position where they formally look at the laws they've got in place regarding land use controls and business regulation by doing a sunset review process like they do at the state every 12 years or so with all the state agencies. I think it should happen much more frequently at the local level, every 3 years, every 5 years on rotation, and you can do it with a charter amendment that creates a sunset commission. And I also recommend having some money dedicated to journals and publications dealing with these issues. They can go into your library or into a section of your planning department. And then you, as the activist, can go in and look at the city's own purchase material and find the information that will help you in your arguments with City Hall and your fellow voters about why we should change the laws on land use regulation or on local businesses. I think in that setting, with hearings being held, those who are the victims of the process, developers or simply homeowners who had difficulty getting permits, will have a place where they can come and give their testimony without feeling they're going to be retaliated against by the city officials, because now it's part of the official city process for doing business. So I think that's a way to start the process to recapture lost property rights and make it easier to run and start a business. Turn the page. I thought this would be particularly interesting to people in Bastrop County, where you had those very serious wildfires. How long ago was it? Was that last year or the year before that we had? Year before, okay, 2011. Well, they have serious fires out in California. I went in touch with a guy named Dick Ryder, who's an activist in the San Diego area, and he did an e-letter at one point in which he was talking about the aftermath of some serious fires they had in his part of California. And they had this very sad story this man told about how much difficulty he had getting permits to rebuild what he lost because of a fire. So I think what might be useful in parts of Texas where wildfires are a recurring threat is to take steps to make sure that the charters have procedures where, in the case of a disaster, that the process of getting permits to rebuild what you had and maybe even improve it, because obviously if you had an older building, you may want to improve it if you're going to rebuild, that you be given quick access to those permits. I can tell you last year, or maybe it was the year before, in Houston, they adopted a new, tougher version of the Historic Preservation Ordinance. I was fighting it every step of the way. I was on the losing side of that one. But there's another group that was fighting part of what was being proposed, and they did manage to get the city to include an element in the new ordinance that says if there is a disaster, such as a hurricane that blows through Houston, does a lot of damage simultaneously to many, many structures, so that the planning department or the permit department is overwhelmed with applications, that their applications will be accelerated through the process. And I've gotten I have in my files many horror stories about people having problems getting permits after they've gone through a disaster in their city. Okay, the next two materials deal with the strategy and how to play politics to win through the one-day petition drive strategy. And I point out that in this country we have 30,000 cities and we have 3,000 counties, and most are small population. Most are, I think, available to this strategy of election day petition drives and building Liberty voting blocks. And so I say, because we're Americans, we're used to a 9-inning game. It's called baseball. And because 99% of the country are small population jurisdictions, it's the 99-and-9 plan. So if we all get to work in May, perhaps have 4 or 5 or 6 cities in Texas doing petition drives, then we can double that in November and double it again the following May, and it'll spread throughout Texas and beyond our borders into other states. And with a bit of luck, that surge will sweep the country in 9 years. It will be a much better state of freedom than we've been in our lifetime. Okay, turning the page. One way I think to play effective politics is to reach out and make alliances, or not necessarily alliances, but just develop cordial relationships with other political people in your city or your county, and make it easy for that to happen. In Houston, my organization, the Houston Property Rights Association, has weekly meetings. We do it about 40 times a year. And I think if I made more efforts, we would find more people there who could participate. But as it is, we do get a mix of political sentiments, and we are able to discuss issues of common concern. And I think that by doing this, you find you have a way to bring together people who are all, no matter left or right, they have reforming desires or reformist desires for their city or for their community, and you can find issues to work on, especially at the local level, because most people don't like to see tax dollars given to developers. They don't like to see people lose their property rights. They're horrified at that oftentimes. And so you can find a lot of easy agreement that may not be so easy to find at the state level, and certainly not at the federal level, where we have the big issues such as welfare, funding for defense, all that divides us. But at the local level, I think we can find a lot to agree on. Can you go up to the microphone, sir, and I'll take your question. As Malcolm does that, I will move you to the next page, which deals with commuters. Yes, Malcolm, what's on your mind?
Barry, Malcolm Brown, for those that haven't met me or I haven't met them. The value in your meetings every week is, to this point, we have both local, county, state, and federal candidates now coming to your meeting asking to speak before that, and they actually debate among themselves. In fact, we had Ted Cruz's father debating the representative for David Dewhurst here in last year's election. So it's a great forum to get involvement, even on small towns. They will come if they figure out that there's an organized group that could be for them or against them. They don't really know how big your group is. They just want to speak.
Well, when you get that Liberty Voters Bloc built up, when you start to amend charters, you're showing that you are effective. They want to be present to be on your good side at a minimum. So thank you for mentioning that. The politicians, they're sensitive if they feel that you've got a sting. And so if you can prove that you are effective when you want to push on an issue, I think you always will get their respect and attention. Okay, then turning to the next page, dealing with commuters. A lot of government power grows from the fact that the officials say that we need to plan for our future. And so we have city planning. The idea of a comprehensive plan underlines the zoning ordinances and cities which have zoning. There's also the idea of regional planning beyond the city into the multiple counties. We have I think it's a 13-county regional plan being written now for the Houston area. And the credibility of the politician is based on two or three things. One is they belong to national organizations such as highway engineers, and they will craft standards of mobility in their societies, which are published in the books, which are very expensive, and then they're adopted by the state and local level, and that becomes the guidebook for what should be done with transportation, for instance. Another way this occurs is that they have computer models. Computers have been a part of policy making since, I think, the 1950s, and of course they're quite common now, and it's often tied to projected gridlock. And what they don't acknowledge in the problem with computer modeling and traffic models is that they don't, until recently, have not had a feedback loop which reflects the fact that when congestion grows, people will change how they use the road system. And you've got you've got business owners in the downtown who find it difficult to recruit workers, and so they will move out to the suburbs to get closer to the workforce. You've got workers who don't want to be paying, they're driving too much or too long, and so they will move closer to the work site. Not too difficult, and roughly half your population is renting. After a year or so, their lease can expire and they can move closer to the new work site. And then you have retailers who always want to get closer to their customers, and so they will build stores closer to where the new residential enclaves are. So you got these forces at play that the planners never acknowledge or talk about. and yet they are at play. And what this article shows you, this is Census Bureau data, this is where it's confirmed, and it shows you that there's a pattern that the travel time for the Houston area commuters stays under half an hour. And that's pretty much the national pattern. New York City is now above 30 minutes, but that's in part because such a large portion of that region commutes by mass transit. Mass transit is typically twice as long as personal transit, and that tends to bump up your average. They recently went above 30 minutes. But there is evidence that shows that people enjoy travel to a certain extent, and they have a budget that says they want to be traveling about every maybe an hour or a little more every day, and they don't want to have the work trip too long. That's on average. Some people actually don't mind the longer trip. It is personal time, and people actually do enjoy a trip that gives them some private time away from the office, away from the family. So all these factors are not brought into play when we're talking about transportation, what the new expenditure should be to deal with future growth. And I think this is a very important article if you want to challenge what the government is arguing with you in terms of expanded power over the population, where they can live, where they can work, and what should be built in terms of roads or mass transit or high-speed rail. Okay, turning the page. I thought this was a revealing article. I happened to be down in Missouri County and came across this article in a local newspaper, and it showed me there a man whose name I read many times in the Houston paper, Gary Trish. He had been the head of the 12-county TxDOT region around Houston, and he currently retired, and they took a job with Dannenbaum Engineering. That's a very powerful engineering firm. Gary Dannenbaum has headed up the state professional association, and so it's a case of it's the swinging door phenomenon. We hear about that with the Pentagon, but here we have it taking place with the engineering fraternity and the companies that hire engineers. So I thought this was revealing and is something you might want to keep in your files. Now the last one is also important. You may know that, again, dealing with transportation and how much new road space we need, TxDOT relies on the reports that are put out by TTI, the Texas Transportation Institute, up at A&M. Now, TTI is actually funded by TxDOT. TxDOT pays their bills, and TTI puts out an annual mobility report, which always gets headlined in our city. I've got a couple of copies with me if somebody wants to see a recent story about a recent TTI mobility report. But they always frame things in a very frightening fashion. It makes you believe we're facing gridlock. Well, the Canadian government took a look at the TTI mobility reports a few years ago, and what you have here is a page and a half, which I reduced down to one sheet, which shows that they find that an unrealistic and too expensive standard to implement. And so they have chosen to not adopt the American way of looking at traffic. This is put out by the research arm for the Canadian government. If you'll also look at this carefully, you'll see that even though they reject what the Americans have embraced, they still have a fuzzy idea of what transportation needs actually are. And in fact, it really is a subjective decision in which they try and make it look like it's scientific and engineering and precise in an engineering fashion. I think it's a very valuable document to have if you're going out to challenge what government may have in mind for regional plans for your part of Texas. You'll find this very useful. Okay, moving on to other items before you. I have one about the Tea Party in Cleveland, in Liberty County. This is one, a Tea Party last May, on the day of the primaries, went out and covered several precincts in the city of Cleveland, Texas, where they have red light cameras. And in one day, they got within about a dozen signatures of their goal. I call that a one-day petition drive, a success. There was no rush to finish. The man who put this together is Aubrey Vaughn, a local pastor. who, by the way, does not live in Cleveland. He lives outside. You don't have to live in the city to do a petition drive. And so he turned in 1,000 signatures in July. They weren't all from Cleveland. He didn't mind turning in bad signatures. He had enough good ones. And so it was now been validated. It'll be on the ballot in November. If you turn to the next page, this is the one documented, remake your city policies. On this document, I have 50 possible charter amendments. I recommend that you start with one that's easy to explain, easy to sell to voters. I list them there. There's about 7 or 8, but there's 50 to choose from. I gave a shorter version of this talk to the Dayton County Republican Liberty Caucus chapter on Monday, and they looked through this list, and it looks like they're going to go for one that would require the city of Dayton to do a zero-based budget every 3 years. That's the one that they like. But you can do others, such as preventing City Hall from moving money out of enterprise funds, or stop them from giving tax dollars to developers, or stop the police from putting up drones. There's lots of things you can do with this mechanism. And there's 50 choices here, and there's more to be found if you want them. I mean, I've got more in a file in my office. The next item is also important. This is the one titled Planner Deceptions. When I was doing my initial research in 1982 on transportation, I was calling people. I said, you're a transportation economist, and what should I read and who else should I talk to? Because I'm skeptical about whether Houston needs to have a rail system. So this is a man whose name I was given and a phone number, and I called him up, and it turned out these people who have national reputations are quite accessible. He picked up the phone, talked to me for 20 minutes, gave me some suggestions, and I haven't talked to him since, but I've certainly been aware of him. He's known as Marty Wax, and for a time he was editing a journal devoted to ethics in the planning profession, and this is a rather famous article about how the planners lie with numbers. This is very much a part of how rail is justified, and I think you'll also find this valuable for your files if you want to engage government and challenge the process and the assumptions they're using. This is a very important article I came across a few years ago in Liberty Magazine. I actually met the author in 2010 when I had a booth at Liberty Fest in Las Vegas. That's where he lives. And in this article, he points out a problem that freedom-minded people have trying to sell their message to the ordinary citizen who hasn't necessarily made that commitment. And I think he makes a convincing case that most people don't care for freedom or liberty per se, not as their primary concern. They're more concerned with fairness. And so I think anybody who's trying to sell a liberty message has to find a second way to frame that message so that people see it as being, when you have more freedom, you're also being more fair. Okay, the next item in your stack is a two-sided handout with 2 examples of petitions used to successfully amend the Houston Charter. One deals with a ban on red light cameras. This actually is still in litigation, but it did get enough votes, and the cameras in Houston are now down. If you ban red light cameras after they're up, as Byron has explained, it's a little complicated because you've got a contract there with a vendor. The vendor can intercede with lawsuits, and you don't necessarily get them down right away. Your smartest move is to ban them before they're up, a much cleaner kind of political action. But it does show you, on one hand, how brief and simple a charter amendment can be. It can be that brief. The one that my group wrote back in 92 to amend the Houston Charter was about that long. It was very brief. Now, on the other side, you can get an example of how lengthy and detailed a charter amendment can be. This is one that I opposed. This is a case of setting up a new infrastructure fund with 4 different revenue streams, including a brand new revenue stream called a drainage fee. And this is how detailed that charter amendment was. So don't hesitate to write a detailed charter amendment if you're dealing with something which has a lot of loopholes that you want to close. Okay. Now the next item is one titled Success Breeds Success. This is a 9-year plan to restore America. I've already outlined it in a few words. The idea is that as you're using these tools to build alliances, change law through the charter amendment process, put pressure on the elected officials, this success will reverberate throughout your city and your county and your state and spread beyond your state to other states. And as I say, I think we can get a surge of freedom and lower taxes by taking the steps that I've outlined here today. Now, the very last item I have for you is something which you may have already looked at. This is Larry and Isabel's prepared letter that was given to the city secretary's office in Fredericksburg on Friday morning, in which they laid out what they've done with their petition, what they had to do in terms of state law, and then gave the city secretary or her representative a way to sign off to acknowledge that those signatures have been turned in. I don't think this is required by law, but it's a nice summary of what you've done, and it's a nice way to have a record that has been turned in and accepted. On that point, on that final point about the petition being turned in, I just found out a couple of days ago something was shocking to me. The people who did the petition drive to outlaw red light cameras in Houston did another petition drive to reverse a decision by City Council to basically prohibit people from feeding the homeless in Houston. This is done at the behest of downtown business people who don't like having homeless close to their properties, their commercial properties. And the city's working with some major nonprofits who are stepping in to take over the job of feeding the homeless. But many people like to feed the homeless, and many of the homeless prefer to work with outside the formal nonprofit structure. And there's a lot of resistance to it. In fact, it was quite exciting to see radical leftists and anarchists, conventional Republicans, and ordinary Democrats all working together to try and stop this before it actually was adopted by council last year. So the Kibosh family did another petition drive to overturn that with a charter amendment, and they turned their signatures in months ago, I think probably September, if not earlier, and I just found out that the City Council has not yet counted those signatures. Apparently, there's nothing in the law that requires them to do it. Now, I talked to a lawyer. I said, well, can't they file a writ of mandamus and make the city count the signatures? And the answer is yes. So I suppose you could go to court and make an argument with the judge that the city is obliged to count the signatures as they're submitted per state law, and I guess you could expect to win, that the judge would order the city to count the signatures. But it does present a problem. Now, they haven't chosen to do that. I don't know the reasons for sure. I can only guess. But that seems to me that that's an option they still have. But it also suggests to me that as we start to do petition drives and become aligned with other people like-minded across the state, we can collectively put pressure on the legislature to amend the law so that there is some requirement that the city has to count those signatures within a month's time or something like that.
Is that because it's a general law city?
No, Houston, of course, is a home rule city. It was done in Houston. No city does. Apparently, there's nothing in the law that requires them to count the signatures by a certain date, or by.
I thought they had to present. They only had 10 days to present it to the council.
There's a difference between a charter election and then your local charter, what it says for an initiative or a referendum.
Okay.
Your city can bind itself, like, saying that only 30 days for a referendum, and the city has this long to count the signatures on that. But there's nothing from the state law that requires the city to do that. It's a city thing.
Because ours does say within 10 days they have to present it to the council.
That's in your charter regarding initiatives to create a new ordinance or to repeal an ordinance through a referendum?
It's in both in the initiative and the referendum and the amendment.
The charter amendment? You have,
It says they have 10 days to present it to the council, and then 71 days that cannot be put on the ballot before 71 days have elapsed.
that's a charter amendment procedure in your city charter.
The 71 days is from the state.
Okay, but your city charter has actually some language about how a charter amendment petition is to be handled.
10 days is yours?
Ours doesn't just address charter amendments. It addresses the initiatives.
Right,
and
that's what ours does too.
Right. So I'm just saying, under state procedure, there is no requirement to count the signatures.
So what the coupon orders did was a charter amendment using the, Chapter 9 of the Government Code, which is a Texas law that governs cities that have a charter. And so they're playing by that rule book. If you do a local initiative or referendum, you're playing by the city's local rule book, not the state's.
And
So what you're saying is that they don't have to count our petition signatures within a certain amount of days?
That's what I'm saying. And I was shocked to learn this just recently. I thought those signatures on the feeding ordinance had been counted long ago. Let me also mention that some charters in Texas do have a charter amendment procedure, but it's only valid, or you don't have to live by it unless it was adopted before September 1985. Those are grandfathered. I think you and I have discussed that. 1985. All right. So if you have a charter that was created or has amended since '85, you can go by the state rule of 5% of registered voters. Now I've determined that even though cities often do say you have to have 25 or 30% of the voters who voted in the last city election, that 25 or 30% gets very close to the 5% of registered voters. It's not a big difference in the number of signatures, so it's almost the same hurdle. Okay, any questions? Well, I'm that complete in my explanation. There's no questions, no comments. All right. Well, then let's go back to the agenda and see what else we have in mind here for today. Okay, we got Mike Ford. So let's bring up Mike, and let me give. Mike's got his microphone on, so let me give you a little bit of a bio on Mike. Mike and I have known each other for 10, 12 years, back to the 90s perhaps.
Something like that.
Yeah, and somehow it came to my attention. Mike was born in 1931 in Baltimore. He received a BS in Business Administration from Loyola College in Baltimore, and then a master's in Business Administration from Pepperdine. His marketing experience includes years with IBM, Service Bureau Corporation, and Autodesk. Mike was one of that boom of .com millionaires, I have to tell you. So he's got a place in history. Now, regarding California Prop 140, which put limits on terms of office, it was put on the ballot in California in 1990. It limited the number of terms that California state senators and representatives can stay in office. You know, I think this is I'm just going to let you tell this, Mike. That's part of your story.
All right.
It passed, and as I mentioned before, that's why Arnold Schwarzenegger is no longer governor of California. I give you Mike Ford.
Thank you, Barry. Good afternoon. When I moved to California, it was there were 30 million. It was 1978, and the state, of course, is the most populous in the union, and the tax rates in every county, the property tax rates, were under pressure to be raised because every county wanted higher taxes. And I was a property owner. And one day I heard that a guy named Howard Jarvis and Paul Gann were going to put a proposition on the California ballot that limited all tax rates, property tax rates in California, in whatever county, to 1%, period. And I thought that was like, holy moly, you can do that? That's the power of the initiative process. You can change the law at the top. And that's why it's so important that people take note of it and utilize it to protect themselves. And it got put on the ballot, and it was outspent, massively outspent by all the people who wanted to continue collecting tax monies. But the voters voted for it, and it changed things in California, and it served as a model for all the states around the country that had the initiative process, because anybody else could duplicate it that had the initiative process. So it highlighted the initiative process as a people tool, and that was something that didn't exist before, the widespread knowledge of that. Now, when I decided to get involved, I wanted to end the politicians re-electing themselves, and then since they could be re-elected, all the moneyed interest gave them money. They had unlimited sums of money. If you were running against them, ha, ha, ha. And so they were in term after term after term after term, and you had guys in there 20 years in elective office, in 2-year offices. 10 times they'd been reelected. And of course, they said it was because they were doing such a good job and the people liked it. Anyway, that was the situation, and so we came up with a proposition to cure that problem. Proposition 140. And Proposition 140 limited elected officials to 2 terms. If it was a 2-year term, you got 2 of them. That's all. And go do something else. If it was a 4-year term, you have 2 of them. That's all. Go do something else. And so we put that proposition on the ballot. It's Proposition 140. And Ralph Nader came along, well, somebody else put another proposition that was doing that job, but not as well, on the ballot. So Prop 131, and Ralph Nader was supporting that. And they liked, the electorate liked Prop 140. We were outspent 31-1 in that election. But we won with 52% of the vote. So I'm a deep believer in the initiative process. And in Texas, when I came to Texas, the first thing I did was go down to the state legislature because I wanted Texas to have an initiative. Well, that ain't going to happen in Texas. The legislators don't want the people to have the initiative process, and so they're not going to pass one for Texas. But yet we have it at the local level, and we should use it at the local level because lots of things get done at the local level, and with the initiative, you can shape exactly how they're going to be done. Frame a good solution, craft it into an initiative, raise the money, and get to collect the signatures. Sometimes you can do it without money, but you got to have a lot of people power if you're doing it without money. So I don't recommend trying that way because it usually doesn't work. But that's that's what I have done with my time, and I encourage others to do the same with their time, because you can craft things the way you want rather than begging legislators to do something that they're being paid $100,000 not to do, or to stop doing something that you don't want them to do that they're being paid $100,000 to do. Because, you know, it's sort of common human nature to go with where the money is, and the people in elective office get there because they went with where the money is, and they just continue that process. If you have, that's pretty much my view on this. If you have any questions about the process.
And can you give us more, I invited you here today, Mike, because I would like to see a statewide initiative as well. It's in the state constitution. There's no enabling law to allow it to happen. You can confirm that. But maybe if we get the city charter changes and the initiative process more popularly used, it'll build statewide support to put pressure on the legislators to make it possible in Texas. What do you think?
Well, I do think that's a good idea, and I think that in pursuing that idea, one should craft an action plan that tells somebody at the city level exactly what they have to do to make it happen in their city. Now, after that's been cycled a few times, you probably got a pretty good plan, and you got some believers, and you can build. But it takes energy and some money. I don't think it takes a lot of money, but it takes a lot of energy to do that. But that would be a marvelous thing to do in Texas.
Can you tell us a bit about how you raised money in California in 1990 and what you spent it on?
Well, in my life, I've been very fortunate, and so I had joined Autodesk when they started, and Autodesk is now, I don't know, a very large company, but it made all of us who started it wealthy. I mean, we were millionaires. In fact, we were multimillionaires, and so that's how I got started, and that's not something that's easily duplicated.
But a statewide campaign, what was your budget for a statewide campaign?
$1 million in California.
Only $1 million? That doesn't sound like enough.
Well, we spent more than that, but you know, we started out with that as the idea.
What kind of pushback did you get from those who didn't want to bring in term limits? Was there a campaign to defeat you?
Yes. One of the problems I have now is I'm 82 years old, and I don't remember as well as I used to. So the question, you know, I could have answered in the past. I can't answer as I stand here today.
I should have asked you to review your files.
Well, I don't know that I have a lot of files on that anymore, but I wish I could be helpful. Ask me some more questions. Maybe I know the answers to some of them.
Any other questions?
On the term limits, that's all, or can they sit out and then run again?
No, we made it 2 terms, and that's it. No more. Right. Now, there have been proposals to change that, but that was...
Now, on this date, you say the Texas Constitution does not allow initiatives?
At the state level.
So why did you not pass an amendment to the Constitution that allows it?
You can, but you got to get the state legislators who don't like the idea.
Well, that's right. We can't propose it.
Right. See, we don't have the statewide initiative here, so otherwise we could go out and do it, collect the signatures, put it on the ballot, and sell it, and the people would pass it.
Did Texas ever have it?
No. No, not at the state level.
Mike, can you tell us a story of how we almost got it back in 1917?
No, I can't.
Okay, well, as I recall the story, that was the reform era, and many states were getting INR at that time, and that's somehow it got into the Texas Constitution that we have a right to it. Then there was a bill proposed to make it possible, but it had a very high signature threshold. And the advocates for the bill said, we don't like that, we want a lower threshold, and so they urged their people to work against it. So it was defeated, and then the momentum never came back. Maybe it was World War I that came along that changed everything. And so we were close to it, and of course now the thought is, well, we should have accepted what we had a chance to get at the time, and then we could have come back and modified it to be more reasonable with a lower threshold. So we came that close. And then a generation ago, when some friends of mine were active in Texas, they had 2 or 3 state-level politicians. Ragnar Carr was one that were behind Bill Clinton, I think. Not Bill Clinton, Clayton.
Clayton Williams?
Yeah, Clayton Williams, thank you. He was willing to support it, but in every case they wanted a high signature threshold that made it impossible. And so it never got beyond that discussion with the advocates and with 2 or 3 politicians. So, but the issue could come back if the public, we got 350, almost 3 home rule cities in this state. We've got over 1,000 cities. So if we do initiatives at the city level and charter amendments, people will start to like the idea and be more willing to support it at the state level as well. That's my thought.
It would seem that if you could come up with a couple model proposals that would be applicable to most cities and it would be widely accepted, and then organize that so that you pass them in 6 places. You could build on that. That would snowball. If you did that in one election, you could snowball that for future elections to all over Texas.
So what would this initiative have in it?
It would have the right to initiative.
Now, at the city level, you can get popular support at the city level. You can do that with a petition drive. Just sign that idea.
Yes.
And now you're building through several cities at once.
So I don't know what it would have. If we all got together and we figured out what would be good city initiatives, and we came up with 10 ideas, and you took the top 3.
Okay, I got you.
That the group agreed.
With 10 cities having success doing this kind of thing,
yes,
that would start to show the success of the concept and make it easy to ramp it up to the state level.
And do it in a way so that as you did it, you created a model that could be just taken to the other cities and the names changed.
So is it doable, do you think, at a local level, to roll back the property taxes to a lesser percent?
Yes, I mean.
And we would do that as an initiative?
Yes, that's what they did with Proposition 13. That's what Howard Jarvis and Paul Gann did. I was a property owner, and when I'm faced with, they're going to raise my tax above 1% per year of the property value, so it had just huge support when it was proposed. It blew the establishment away. I mean, they were stunned.
Get their attention around here.
Yes, it was.
Well, I have to see what your charter says, though, because a lot of charters specifically say that you can't use the initiative process for having to deal with taxes.
Yeah, ours does.
Well, in the case of Houston, we did have a petition drive in 2001 to limit the growth in taxes to a ratio of combining the population and inflation. And that was adopted by the voters. The mayor at the time didn't like what we had. He had his own version, and that was also approved by the voters. The mayor at the time said, well, mine got more than yours, so yours doesn't count. I'll only put mine in the charter. We went to court, and I believe we got it in the charter too. But it does limit the growth. You may not be able to lower it down, but you can limit the growth to a ratio. And I don't think there was ever any legal challenge to that aspect.
I have a question. On the practical side of things, how exactly, I know as a more, and this may be covered in the information packet, or you may have covered it before, Barry, but as a general rule, how far and above the petition signatures should you go? Because I know it's notorious for there to be signatures thrown out, invalidating your whole petition drive. Yes. So what is a general rule, practically speaking, that you should go above what it calls for? Just in case you have a judge who's, you know, more of an activist and decides to throw out the majority of your signatures. So.
Well, I don't know what the number should be, but that should be looked into, and it should be largely surpassed, because you get a lot of politics going on with the, I mean, the political establishment does not want limitations on the money they get.
I can probably supplement that. It's getting easier now to turn in a valid petition because the county's database is available to you on the web. So what we did, and all the petition drives I've been involved with, you try and validate as you get them, and you cross out the bad ones. And that's used to be quite troublesome. You had to do it with hard copy printouts. But now that things are on the web, you can do it with computers. And in a small city, it's relatively easy to do. Isabel can probably talk a bit about how she did it, but I gather it's just a routine thing you did almost daily, checking on the new signatures.
Right. Of course, the one-day petition drive where we got 369, that, we had to do them all at once.
Right, yeah.
But it was over a period of time.
Yeah, you had 6 months to get it done, so there was no rush to.
Right. But when I started it, I called the Secretary of State, and the contact person there said, you should get at least 3 to 5% more than what we require.
Well, I would.
My answer is as many as you can get.
I would think it would be a lot more than 3% more. I would think it should be at least 20% more.
Well, you see, you're validating every signature, so you're sure that they're good signatures.
Sure, yeah. And like when I went to validate, a lot of you say print your name, sign your name, but a lot of people just sign in both places, and so you couldn't read, exactly what they signed. But with the birth date, I could pretty much figure out who it was, and then I printed the name in so that the secretaries of our city can't say I don't have it. So eligible. And the state law petition says that the only thing that has to be filled out by the person is a signature. Anybody can put the birthday in.
Comment?
Anybody can put the name in. It's the way I read the law.
Yeah, you're right. And just to add to that, the stronger your petition is, the less likely you're going to face opposition.
Is that on?
There you go. The stronger your petition is, the less likely you're going to face opposition. What I faced, you probably won't face, but when we turned in our petition, the camera company got a copy of our petition and went down to the courthouse and pulled voter registration cards to compare signatures. So the more signatures that you have, the less likely they're going to think that they can throw out enough to go over to get rid of your petition, and the better political power you're going to have. Because if they say you needed 1,000 signatures and you turned in 1,050 signatures, they're going to say, yeah, okay, well, you just got there, but that's not really a mandate from the people. But if you needed 1,000 and you got 3,000, imagine what kind of a statement that would make. So the more you can turn in, the better off you are.
But you are going to meet a lot of apathy. And so you're, actually it turns out, and everybody who's been in the organization knows that there's a small amount of people that do all the work and go out and gather petitions. So you do have that point.
Sure. I'm a bookstore owner. I'm used to apathy.
There's an organization in San Antonio, Texas Public Policy Foundation, and they have a magazine, Veritas. And in October 2001, I wrote an article for them, letting the people take the initiative. Is I&R good for Texas? So if you have access to that, might want to.
So that's on the web today? It's on the web?
I don't know. It may be. I don't know.
Okay. This is one copy?
Yeah, you can have it.
Okay. But we'll give this to the sponsoring group and they can make copies. Okay, any other questions or comments? I guess not. Well, Mike, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, we're about to wrap it up. Can the sound man tell me, is my microphone working? It fell off? Okay. I have a few closing comments. I did forget to mention one thing. Let's see if I can find what I want to show you. There's an organization called State Policy Network.
Repeat that?
State Policy Network. This is based somewhere on the East Coast, probably around in Arlington. And it's an organization of all the free market think tanks in the country. And they've got a website, and you can get these documents on their web. And they have a list of all of them, and you look, it's about 60. So I calculate perhaps $200 million a year is spent funding these free market think tanks. That means there's a lot of people with resources to put into the sort of things that we want to do. And if we start to have success in the small cities with our volunteers, then these people might see that they should join in and help us in the mid-sized cities and in the big cities. Now, I've done petition drives or been involved with them in big cities, and I can tell you it can cost $30,000 to $40,000 to do a petition drive, and then it still costs money to win the election. But if you have people who are millionaires, who believe in smaller government, and they realize there's finally a way to do more than simply fund the think tank, they can fund the do tank or get it done tank, then I think we'll start to see freedom return to our country a lot faster. So that's something to look forward to as you contemplate where you're going to go from here. Early voting starts at the end of the month, and of course election day for most cities in Texas will be May 11th. You do have time to do a petition drive. I suggest outlawing red light cameras because we already have the language written by a smart lawyer, and it's been on the ballot, to my knowledge, 4 times in Texas, and each time voters have rejected red light cameras. So it should be a winner, and you can put that together very, very quickly. And when you do this, by the end of the day, you can send an email or a tweet to your volunteers and supporters saying, we've done it, we've finished, we're 10% over our threshold. And you can also say, as Larry and Isabel have done, but we're not going to stop. We've got 6 months to finish this. We're going to get more. We don't have to turn them in today. There's reason to get as many as possible. But you'll be able to tell those people that night that you've had a success and they helped you with only 2 or 3 hours of work. And I can tell you, in my experience, there's almost no conservative free market person in the country that can claim that kind of reward with so little work. So one person has to put in 10 hours, maybe 20 hours of organizing, but at the end of election day, you basically have had your success and you've got it in hand. And then, of course, you'll have the election later on and you should have a victory there. But let me tell you, once you turn in those signatures, then everybody sees you differently. Now you're a policymaker. You're a person who can make things happen. You're not simply a complainer. You're a person who actually knows how to use the system to your ends. The politicians will give you a lot more respect. The bureaucrats will, and also the media. And because the media knows that you have a way to make your feelings and opinions meaningful, they will start to call you for opinions. That's what's happened to me ever since I got involved with politics in that campaign to stop rail in 1982, 83. Ever since then, the media have called upon me for comments. I should tell you one story that's entertaining and also encouraging. In 1996, in May, my group fought the school bond proposal, Houston Independent School District bond proposal, and we beat them. We were surprised. They were surprised. 6 months later, there was another issue on the ballot to fund the Sports Authority, which Malcolm told us about, and build initially a baseball stadium. And I was the face of the opposition. We didn't have any serious money, but every time the pro-stadium advocates would have a press conference, they felt obliged to come and talk to me. And I live in a depressed part of town called the near north side, and they would line up with their TV trucks in front of my house and knock on my door to get a quote because the other side had made a public statement that day, and they felt obliged to come and talk to the opposition. Now that's how it is. When you're proven to be a winner, you get a lot more attention, a lot more respect. If you do the weekly meetings, as I suggest, you're going to get your name in the media when you announce that meeting and who your speaker is going to be. When you might get the media there if it's an important speaker that's worthy of remarks are worthy of recording. So your name gets back in the paper on that event. So you become much more of a political presence in your city or in your county when you hold weekly meetings and go out there and you find issues that you can win on. If you're a county-wide group, or in this case a group that's 4 counties, you can select cities that you want to amend charters. You don't have to live in those cities to actually do the petition drive. I would suggest trying to find somebody in the city who actually lives there, but it's not necessary. And so you can actually be a very important part of the political news and activity in those counties where you choose to do that. And I think that's far more rewarding than trying to elect people to office, who is, as Isabel hinted on, she told me more about, they've actually elected 2 people out of their reform group in Fredericksburg, and both proved to be disappointments. 3, okay. Okay. But isn't policy making a lot more fun than trying to elect? So they're
politicians has reflected on our judgment.
Well, it just shows that we can all be fooled. I mean, they're likable people and they're sincere and they've been with you all the way up until they get into office, and then their mindset changes. I think, Isabel, you told me you confronted one of these people, and you asked him, why is he voting for the things he said he would vote against? He said to you, well, I wouldn't be thought of as a team player if I voted against these things. So their mindset changes, their peer group changes. So I would say avoid working with politicians, trying to get them elected, maybe support them in certain circumstances, but generally work on policy. Be a policy maker. You'll find politics a lot more fun and a lot more rewarding. As I mentioned earlier, I hope we might have another one of these workshops in perhaps September. At that point, we might have people who come in who talk about their success or their experiences in May when they do their petition drives, perhaps to amend their charters to outlaw red light cameras or to get a zero-based budget. Any kind of thing can happen. Everybody will have something to share about what they learned that day, and that can be used for future petition drives. With that, I'll simply say thank you very much.
One thing I do want to mention, in our experience, we found just the knowledge that we were circulating a petition caused the city to change their direction.
Right.
And what they were going to put on the ballot. So you can have an effect even before you get to the points that...
Oh, I fully agree. Once they realize that you've learned the system well enough to actually make it work for you, they'll care a lot. Now, I want to urge our speakers to please stay around for a while so we get a few group photos, and I want to give the meeting back to Kathy. Oh.
Thank you, everyone, for
Let's give you a microphone.
And,
There you go.
can you hear me? Does it work? I guess it works now. Does it work? Okay, good. I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to give a special thanks to our speakers. Really appreciate your time, and I'm excited, and I think the rest of the group is excited. Like I said, we're a young group, and we have a lot of work ahead of ourselves, but I think we can be successful as you have in your endeavors, and it just will, believe me, we'll tap on your shoulders and ask you for some advice. But not only do I hope that everybody here leaves with a wealth of new information, but also that we've all formed a good friendship. So thank you for coming, and I just want to warn you that there are red lights in Bastrop and in Elgin, so if you leave going towards Austin or Houston, you're going to be careful.
Those are red lights with cameras?
They are the red light cameras, yes, sir. They are. So thank you again, and appreciate you all coming. So.
Thank you.